Boom. We are live.
Okay.
How you doing, Bambi?
Hey.
You guys, I'm talking to Bambi Deville, and Bambi is a 7th generation New Orleanian. She is an actress, a stylist, a designer, an entrepreneur. She's the owner of Bambi Deville Vintage in New Orleans. And Bambi and I, we've known each other for a long time. I can't remember the year that I met her. It was after, no, it was before.
It was pre-Katrina. It was before Katrina.
But the way that I met Bambi was, at that time I had owned, co-owned 3 different pieces of property or real estate in New Orleans.
In New Orleans.
Yeah. And that was because that I had attended Tulane University's Law and Business School, fell in love with the city, but for whatever reason, I could not live there full time. So somehow I managed to get myself there in a different way and form through ownership of property, and that allowed me to visit the city at least once or twice a year. So the way that I met Bambi was, I was in the French Quarter, and I was walking around, and I came across there were a lot of antique stores, still antique stores and restaurants and things there. And there was this fantastic painting that was hanging outside of this antique store. And I was like, oh my God, whoever did this? Who did this? So I was, look, when I asked you guys, there was a little bit of fear, because I did sort of come in like, hey, like, what's going on, you know? And the painting was so amazing. I said, whoever this person is, you know, is really special, and, you know, can you tell them, so on and so forth. And that's how I met you. And we started talking, I think, right then and there, right? It
was one of Michael's pieces.
Right. So who we're talking about is your friend, and you can explain that a little bit later about what he does, and sort of how you are an umbrella for all these people, these creative people, including your father, I would say, in some respect. Right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about, maybe the first question is, for people that don't know about New Orleans, you know, what is New Orleans? I mean, the mystique around New Orleans, and what is it's about? Because I think there is some misconception about it in terms of the city.
You know, it's interesting, because right after Katrina, I was in New York. I had been in New York when it happened, and I was lucky because I'd driven there, had my dogs, my car, but because I went to college in New York and have a bunch of girlfriends still there, and my friend Michael Fedor, who's the artist that I have in the shop, he's originally from New Jersey, so we drove up, we did a road trip, and I'm at a girlfriend's in Rhode Island. And I hear, this was right after Katrina, and I hear these people saying, like, who cares about New Orleans? Like, you know, and I'm sitting there, and all my girlfriends are looking at me, and they're waiting for me to react. And, you know, somebody's like, who cares? Why do they want to put so much money back into that city? Just let it go. And I didn't react. I just, you know, I just very quietly, I said, once you go, you'll want to go back. And that was it. Because that's really the reaction that people have when they come to the city.
You mean once they come, they don't want to come?
Once they've been here and they feel it. Because New Orleans is a feeling.
Yes.
It's a feeling. And, you know, the other thing that occurred to me after Katrina was, I know we're not supposed to be talking, we're not necessarily talking about Katrina, but it's such a part of our history, and it's so much a part of who we are as a community. You know, I knew, like, and I knew you know, I was living in the French Quarter at the time. I mean, I knew who all my street cleaners were. I was, you know, it was like, you're worried about everybody that you see every day who's really part of the community. That's just how we are. That's how we are as people. And so that has something to do with why our city's so special.
Yeah,
we're a close-knit community.
Absolutely. And I think one of the takeaways well, there are many takeaways from my stay in New Orleans. It was an amazing place to be for an education, because it wasn't just, law school. It was the community that provided the education for me.
Yeah.
And in terms of what I'm doing now, I mean, I come from a family that's very involved with community, but because I moved around a lot as a young person, I did not have the roots that my parents would necessarily have in Baltimore, right? So New
Right.
Orleans stepped in and became that place for me, even though, I'm here in Switzerland and you were there. I relate more to the people in New Orleans than I do to the people in Baltimore. And in fact, my plan long term is to move back. How I'm going to do that and
Right.
manage that. But that was the aim, even from the very beginning. So I at least want to put that out there. It is a special city. It's like no other. And unless you live there and visited, it's hard to describe or explain to people. With
Yeah.
that, tell us a little bit more. Tell us about your growing up, because I think this is also interesting. We talked about it a
Well,
little bit yesterday.
I mean, growing up in New Orleans, I grew up across the lake on the North Shore, and all of my entire family was in the city proper. And my parents, I have 5 sisters, so my parents decided that they wanted, they wanted for us to grow up not necessarily right in the city like they did,
Mm-hmm.
in a different time, of course. And so we were here every weekend because my grandparents were here. I have an uncle, George Deville, who was a historian, and he had bookstores, and he was a very important New Orleans and French Quarter character. I think I think his drag name was Dolores Doubleday, because he was an editor for Doubleday as well. And
Mm-hmm.
he was he actually introduced the mother. Now, we weren't going to talk about this. I'm thinking about family stuff
No,
right
no,
now,
that's fine.
history, family
Yes,
history. But
right.
like the stuff that I grew up with, my grandfather, which is, you didn't know this, my grandfather Deville was in the state legislature. And so growing up in this family, and my great grandfather, there's something else you didn't know. My great grandfather, Philo-Jean Angeron, was Huey Long's campaign manager in Terrebonne Parish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up with all this history and just listening to the stories, and so rich in New Orleans. My dad grew up in the French Quarter. My
Mm-hmm.
grandparents had a bar and casino on Rampart. It's actually the building that the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival headquarters
Yes.
has been in. That was my grandparents' one of their buildings, one of their bars. So I grew up with all of this and not really understanding how special it was.
Sure.
And then I moved away to go to school in New York, and I never thought I was going to live in New Orleans again. And then I came home after going to LA, and my grandma was sick and my sister was sick, and I wanted to be around my family. And I thought, oh my God, where am I going? Like I was living here for the first time as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
and it really sunk in how incredible the city is.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of getting off topic, but
No. It's good, because I think it creates a backdrop for what we're about to talk about even further,
okay.
which is, you have a journey as someone that's a creative person. This is clear to both you and I. So you decided to become an actress. I think that's where we really, we
Well,
talked yesterday, right?
my mother said that I decided that I was going to be an actress when I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, there was, I really was, when I think about it myself, I think of it like I was very shy. I was the middle child of the first 2. And my sister Laura was like this incredible artist. And my sister Julie was, like a junior elite gymnast. And I supported them. And I was kind of, for me, doing characters and creating characters was fun. And it was kind of a way to get away from myself. I think a lot of actors go into acting because they want to create a life and a character outside of themselves.
Yeah. So you were in New York as an actor. What was that experience like for you?
I was lucky because I met some really good people in the beginning, and I'm talking about in my personally, my personal life. You know, I met my friend Terry Mintz, who's still performing, and she introduced me to her cousin, and who I ended up marrying. But so I got like, so all of a sudden I had this big family around me again, which was something that I needed, obviously, you know. But as far as acting, it was good for me. I liked New York. I worked with the Actors Studio. I was an intern at the Actors Studio. I got to watch, you know, amazing people work. And I worked with a theater company, Naked Angels, for a little while. That I met some really nice people in that, and some people, a few that I've stayed friends with. And I worked with, I did a show that was attached to Steppenwolf in Chicago,
Yeah.
and I got to meet some, you know, so I got to work with some really great people. But even though I loved theater, I was getting to do, I don't know, I worked. So it was good. And then I moved to LA to work on a film, my friend Michael Flocker's film, Idios Puppets, which is was like this really over the top campy B movie, but I got to be one of the stars. So and I should say, and I got to be. It was a fun experience, and I loved that filmmaking experience. I had other filmmaking experiences that I didn't really enjoy, so I kept kind of going back to theater. And I was, I don't know, I wasn't, I wanted to explore, I guess, the world, and I didn't really focus so much on creating an acting career for myself at that time, you know, like in my 20s. I was, you know, and I ended up, my grandma, one of my grandma got sick, my sister got sick. I decided to come home, and I ended up back in New Orleans. I'm sorry. I'm
Circle. Well, let's give the audience an idea of what the time frame of this, right? Because this was what, early 80s.
It was 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
New York, LA.
Yeah.
80s New York. I'm sorry. Yeah, keep me focused because I'm.
No. We got it. So, like in the early 80s, give people a flavor of what it was like, right? So you're
80s New
there. You
York
say, okay,
was
make a decision to
amazing.
go there, and
I studied with Stella Adler. That was a great experience. I went to Pace
who's
University. We had a great theater department.
and who is Stella Adler? Just for people that don't know, because there may be some people who may not know who, you know.
Okay, yeah, because you know, but I find now when I work with younger actors, they're not so. Some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but they don't all have that theater history, the knowledge of the group theater and Stanislavski, and you know, these great teachers that created this wonderful world of theater. And as I always said about Stella, she was a great teacher because she could put what you were doing to words. She had this amazing way of being able to put words to what you were doing, and you'd be like, oh my God, that's is that what it's called? You know. And anyway, so I loved working with, I just always enjoyed doing theater, the excitement.
And the decision to fly to not fly, but I mean to go to New York, I mean to Los Angeles, right? How did that, I'm curious as to how that came about. Because, you know, back then, your friend Michael, go on, I'm sorry.
My friend Michael Flocker was, is a wonderful writer. I think the thing he's known most for is the book, The Metrosexual Male.
Okay.
Remember that was Michael, and he had moved to LA, and he called me and said, Bambi, I have a producer. They want to do a table reading or something of this film that I wrote. And you have to play this part. You're the only person who could play Sheila Baxter. So I flew out there to do the reading. And they were like, you have to keep Bambi, you have to do this. And it was a great experience.
You know what? Yeah. Yeah. What were you
Well, I
saying?
mean, it was my first like lead in a film,
Mm,
and it was the first experience I had of being, and so Michael was a great director, and I had a lot of freedom, so there was some fun stuff I got to do, and whatever. I mean, it was just what I learned after that was that it was an unusual experience,
mm,
you
mm.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm thinking about, I mean, and this is not to pigeonhole you in any way, but it's sort of an example of, let's say, when the TV show Designing Women came into uh, play. Before that, no one had really known anything about characters from, well, they did, but there's always sort of a uh,
Southern women.
yeah, Southern
Southern
women and
women.
stereotype and this sort of thing. And I think they brought some new energy into that
I
genre of
agree. I
character.
agree.
And it's
Yeah.
a double-edged sword because, you know, you have that as the prototype. But I think what that ended up doing was trying to build some depth, right, by using contemporary issues, right? So it was something that um, I remember, and as I'm talking to you, what I'm thinking is that if it's not for people like yourself, because I think the writers of that show were from the South, right? I think Linda,
Yeah.
yeah, she's from the
Thompson.
South, right? So without those people, there would not have been that type of show because most Hollywood or Los Angeles, I mean, they're not connected in the same way. You really are presenting, you know, a part of you. And I think maybe that's why your friend said, "Oh, you gotta play this part because there's something in your persona that is not easily replicated." Do you understand what I mean?
So that character, the character that I played in
Uh-huh.
the film, Sheila Baxter, is a New Yorker.
Uh-huh.
But you're right. I mean, I think there's an essence of Southern women, and
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter. You just can't, yeah. I mean, the women that I know from New Orleans are pretty amazing.
Yes. Yes. I remember my real estate, the woman who rented my apartment, the apartment to me. I don't remember her name. I just remember her whole I mean, it was out of this world. I was like, this lady. And then before she would come over to do checks, and this is short, like one time I think coffee grinds were in the
Yeah.
in the thing. I didn't know what she was talking about. She's like, are there coffee grinds in here? Blah blah. You know, and I think years later I saw her once. I'm telling you guys, as New Orleans, and I'm going a little off topic. I mean, you have something special, and I think it's the people that keep everybody else coming. The people that,
You're talking about coffee. My mother, when I lived in New York, my mother used to ship me CDM coffee, and
mm,
I would mix it with the chock full of nuts to keep it going, to
yeah.
make it last.
Well, look,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to continue, but I have two empty cans of Cafe Du Monde. This is the French roast, right? You can't hear
Yep.
anything in here. And here is the orange label, right? So I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I need
Do you
anyway.
need some?
Oh
Do
yeah,
you?
yeah. So anyway,
Oh,
so
okay.
let's what we also talked about. You started as an actress, but currently what you're doing with regard to this situation that we're in, and this is sort of interesting that you are doing this. You're going around. I mean, just to make it clear for everyone, Bambi has a vintage shop, and you've had the
Right.
shop for quite some time now, right?
My father's an antiques dealer, a rare coin and stamp dealer, antiques dealer, and I grew up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I was always collecting. I started with Bakelite radios. I started with tabletop radios when I was about 12. And that also got me intrigued with music. And, that's a whole other story. But my dad had music boxes, and it made me think about when we'd listen to that music that he would play. And when I say he had music boxes, I mean everything you could possibly imagine. We probably had about 30 of them in the living room, and like record players, music boxes, hurdy-gurdies, and he'd play the music for us. And my dad loved classical music, and I became intrigued with my mom's music, which was more, you know, the pop and 70s and, you know, Joni Mitchell and other types of music and rock. And so I always thought, wow, what did they play on, you know, this music? And so I got intrigued with the radios, which brought me to the Bakelite.
And what is Bakelite? Just for people.
Jewelry. Bakelite is the first, it's like the precursor to plastic. It's the first man-made resin. Okay. And it originally from the 1890s, Belgian chemist created it to replace celluloid. He worked for Kodak, and so without making this about Bakelite, I started collecting the jewelry after discovering it from already having been collecting the radios for years. Right. And said, oh my God, same material, blah, blah, blah. So then I wrote a book. I started collecting World War II or military jewelry, because my grandma Deville always wore an American flag, and she loved red, white, and blue patriotic jewelry, and she was very patriotic. So I got into that, and I started collecting it, and I have this huge collection. And then Schiffer published a book of my collection. They saw it on a display for the museum, and they said, we want to do a book of this. So that's how that happened. But anyway, I started doing a line for the National World War II Museum years ago. I think I was one of the first people to do the cherry jewelry, which everybody does now. And I was trying to do things that were classically wartime Bakelite things for the museum. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I'm just trying to give you some history. I have a vintage store because my father was an antiques dealer, and I really was helping him with his business. And I said, Dad, this is great. I love this, but I have to do something I like too. So I put a case in there of jewelry and accessories and a rack of vintage clothing, and it took off from there. So that was like I moved home in 98, and I started working with him in like 2002. And the store just grew, and it was so much fun for me because I loved dressing people. I worked as a stylist, and I, you know, taught at the Barbizon School, which was when I lived in New York. So it was kind of the same thing. And I was doing, and all of a sudden I was doing fashion shows and all this stuff that I had done before, and just started to come together. And, you know, I like style, I like fashion.
Well, and what's interesting is that you started in 98, and I think I met you right around that time.
So,
because I graduated from law school in 99, because I started in law. I started in 92 and finished in 99. This double program or dual program. But I think shortly there, because 9/11. If you started in 98, and 9/11 happened 2001, and Katrina was what, 2005. So it was really maybe 2003 I met you.
I think that sounds about right, because
yeah.
That's when that's when I started really working with my dad full time.
Yes.
And brought Michael in, and we were at 811 Royal.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful street and beautiful space. And for anybody who hasn't been to New Orleans, you got to check it out. I mean, it's like no other city in the United States. Maybe what is it, Charleston? I've never been to Charleston.
Charleston, you know? I have a girlfriend from Charleston, but whenever we would go there, we spent all of our time in the boat anyway. But yes, I think you could say Charleston. Yeah. That feeling of old Boston. I feel like, for me, the French Quarter always reminded me of like being in the Village in New York, just because it's quaint and small. If you're in certain areas, it's like a little village.
Yeah. Tell us what you're doing now with regard to the French Quarter restaurants and video and this sort of thing. Yeah.
So what I did was, because we had all this more time, and I had started this about a year ago. I'm doing video project. I started working on a video project, and what I started doing now, what I'm doing right now is I just did some I have 5 dogs. I just started doing this project where I thought, let me start with the French Quarter and show people what's open, because what happened was when you go to the Quarter, because I have the shop in the Quarter, you go there, that it's so quiet, it's so serene. It was just like right after Katrina when there was nothing going on. But the thing about that is, and seriously, if you're in the French Quarter at like 7 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody out. You feel, it's like, okay, this is what's going on here. The souls, the energy, you know, and that is what's so prevalent right now. That's why, you know, like, take advantage of these moments. You know, if you can go on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, grab a lunch at one of the 5 or 6 places that are serving takeout, you know. So that's kind of what my focus was. How can I help people who are open in a limited capacity? So I did this. The recent project that I did was some restaurants in the French Quarter. And then we did some musicians and some artists, some performing artists, street performers, who just are kind of in a daze, you know, kind of walking around. They need to perform. There's nobody around to see them, but they have that compulsion as an artist would. And so I'm trying to cover some of that in this moment for however long it lasts, you know.
So specifically with the videos, you're going to different restaurants and you're
interviewing
them,
focusing on what they're doing,
and you're posting, very similar to what I'm doing, you know. And we talked and you were like, yeah, I'll do this. It's like, okay, she's doing the same thing. I mean, so you're literally creating story, the current story about what's happening now in New Orleans, and you're going out to restaurants, interviewing people, serving that out to the public or to, you know, the internet space,
right?
The people that you know of outside of New Orleans, to give people an idea of what they can and cannot, what they can do, what they can't do, the possibilities of helping the community in general, right?
And, you know, and the whole thing is like, I started doing these videos in the shop. But what I was doing, or what I've been doing is, and we haven't released them yet. We've got like 12 episodes, but I've got these really great young people that work with me that are so, you know, I look at them and I'm like, you're so talented, and you know, there's so much there that, you know, what do you want to do with your life? And let's talk about giving you, like, think about your direction, and kind of helping them figure out, you know, because I know, and you know, when we're a little bit older, if you have direction, it will change your life if you have focus. And so that's what I was trying to do with them. What I'm doing with them is like I have this beautiful young woman who works with me. Her name is Priest. Story, like Jules, you know, that I'm just trying to help them kind of come out of their shells. They're in their 20s, you know, they're in their young 20s. Like, what do you want to do? And maybe I can help them focus on certain areas of their lives. So we're doing videos, and I'm like, you know, talk about what you want to do with your life. Think about it. I'm really into visualization and, you know, creating my world. Like, I feel like I've really, for good or bad, you know, we create our existence. And so I'm trying to be, I guess I'm being a mentor in a way to them.
Yeah, well, yes, you are a mentor. Yes, you are a mentor. So
Big
look,
sister,
I'm going to touch on this very quickly, and then we're going to give us an idea of how you visualize something. It doesn't have to be big, and then we'll go into you as an author, you know, what you're doing as an author.
I'll tell you, I'm extremely visual. So for me, it's like the shops, when I, you know, like say designing the interior, it's like I walk into a space And because I know what I have already. I'm into recycling, and I have always collected, and I've got a stockpile.
Mm.
I walk into a space and I just know exactly what it's going to look like. I see it. I see the colors. I see what's going to go where. And so in terms of visualizing my life, anybody who does this, they know there's a moment, there's a second where that what you want to create, what you're creating it's just a part of your body. It's in every cell of your body for that moment. And then it's really happened. It's already happened. It's happening. It's already happened.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
You
Yes, I
know,
do.
so I
Well,
mean, it starts here,
yes.
but once it's in your body, it's like, okay, it's already happened. It's just now like universe, with timing, let's just work together. I'm just trying to be open, and you just start the steps, and you know how that saying, open a door, or the doors that open, you walk through them, however that works. Like sometimes it's just easy,
Yeah.
and there's a flow.
Yeah. I hear you. And then give us an idea. Well, not just an idea, but you authored a book, or what?
The book that I was talking about earlier is that it's called World War II Bakelite Jewelry, Love and Victory, and it's like a documentation of this collection that I have done over the years of the Bakelite jewelry. But the thing that, as everything I think in our lives, for me, I know everything I do, it comes from, there's some influence from somebody. And for me, the jewelry, the clothing, both my grandmas, like my grandma Deville, who was into really patriotic, and my grandma Anna, who had great style and loved movies and fashion. And she's the one that, when I first discovered the clothing from the 40s, I was going to help grandma with her closet, and just this clothing just fell on top of me, and this 40s hats and the fox furs, and I remember this big red fox and these hats, and my grandma was 5'9", and she was larger like I am, and I could wear her dresses from the 40s fit me, and I was 12 years old, and all of a sudden I was just wearing clothing from the 1940s, and I was never going to change. That was it for me. That was like, that, it's my grandma's, my grandma's. I totally credit my grandma's.
Well, look, is there anything else that you?
I'm sorry.
No. I'm saying, is there anything else that I think we covered everything. We did it very quickly. I mean, I could talk to you about so many different topics, because they're like, the way that I see it, at least in these initial interviews, it's almost like I'm trying to cover the different spokes that shoot off from each person. Just so you know, also, people are surprised that I'm able to get people to agree to do this. But I used to work in news. This was my job. I had to get the people on TV. And then I would do all of the information. And so I always see people like almost like this, right? So you have all of these different things that you do.
Right.
Dimensional. I've never seen anybody like, okay, just because they say this in the title means that that's who they are, right? So you've given us, a variety of different things that we could talk about in the future. We leave that open. But is there anything else that you?
Oh, David, I believe. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. I'm trying to. I don't know. It's so much fun for me to see you and to just be corresponding with someone right now.
Yes.
Yeah. So you just try to just keep me focused. I'll answer your questions.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to close it now, but I want you to give the information of your store,
Okay.
and
Okay. So
where they
it's
can find you if they come into New Orleans for any reason,
okay. Okay. Here. Hello, I'm Bambi Deville. Bambi Deville Vintage, and I am now down to one shop in the French Quarter at 608 Charter. It's just a block from Jackson Square. I can, I do private styling. I work with a lot of films and television stylists and costumers, but I'm very happy to redo your closet. Let's redo your closet. Vintage. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. We'll do it
It
again.
was,
This is gonna look. I think within a couple of within the next 6 months, we're gonna have lots of interviews and people get a sense of
yeah.
that they can come. And I think the impact has already been felt. People are getting responses. So we're gonna upload this and put it out as quickly as possible.
Okay. I never I'm trying not to even look at myself in the camera. I'm probably not going to watch this. So you're going to have to tell me, you have to be, reel me in, David.
Yes.
Keep me focused.
I will keep you focused.
Okay.
With that, I'll let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
And we'll be in touch. Take care of yourself.
Stay safe.
You
Stay
too.
safe.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, sweetie. Love you.
Love you too. Bye-bye.